They said the Meridian Tower Gala was the most exclusive event in Atlanta. 500 of Georgia's wealthiest men and women sipping 18-year-old scotch under crystal chandeliers, shaking hands over billion-dollar deals, pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. The caterers were invisible. The waitstaff were furniture. The janitor mopping up a champagne spill near the East Corridor. He might as well have been a ghost. But Simone Reed noticed him. She noticed the tension in his jaw that didn't match the boredom of his posture. She noticed the way his eyes moved across the room like a man counting exits, not tiles. And she noticed, when nobody was looking, that he looked exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the mop in his hands. So she did something no one else in that glittering room thought to do. She offered him a drink. She had no idea she was handing a glass of water to the most dangerous man in Atlanta. If you want to see how this impossible story unfolds, make sure you're subscribed. This is going to be a journey you won't forget. The gig was supposed to be simple. 4 hours, black uniform, tray service, $200 cash. Simone had worked a dozen events like this through the temp agency, tech launches, charity auctions, the kind of parties where people wore a year of her salary on their wrists and didn't bother learning anyone's name. She knew the rules. Smile, stay efficient, stay invisible. Don't make eye contact unless spoken to. Don't offer opinions. Don't linger. She was good at the rules. She'd been following them for 3 years. What she was less good at was ignoring things that didn't fit. The Meridian Tower Gala was crawling with Georgia's business elite, real estate developers, pharmaceutical executives, hedge fund managers, whose names she recognized from billboards and business columns. The room smelled like ambition and expensive cologne, and the particular anxiety of people who couldn't stop performing even when they thought nobody was watching. Simone moved through it all with her tray, collecting empties, distributing canapes, cataloguing the room in the quiet, methodical way that had become second nature. Old habit. She couldn't turn it off even when it wasn't useful. That was how she spotted him. He was working the East Corridor near the fire exit, a man in a grey maintenance uniform pushing a cleaning cart with the unhurried movements of someone who belonged there. Korean, she guessed. Tall, with a sharp jaw and dark hair swept back from his face. Posture so controlled it bordered on military. His hands went through the motions of the job. His eyes were doing something else entirely, counting, mapping, tracking something specific through the crowd. Simone looked away. Not her concern. She had her own reasons for being here tonight, and none of them involved a suspicious janitor. She made 3 more circuits of the main hall, redistributed drink orders, and tried to ignore the low-grade alertness prickling at the back of her neck. The specific instinct that had kept her operation intact for 3 years and had never once been wrong. On her 4th pass through the East Corridor, she saw him lean briefly against the wall beside the fire exit and press 2 fingers to his temple, eyes closing for just a moment. The cleaning cart sat untouched. He wasn't watching the room. For 10 full seconds the performance dropped, and what was underneath was simply worn down. The real kind of tired. The kind that sleep doesn't fix. Simone made her decision before she'd finished thinking it through. She detoured to the service station, poured a glass of still water from the staff carafe, and walked toward him. "Here!" She held it out. Her voice was quiet enough that only he could hear. "You look like you've been on your feet since this morning." He turned. The full weight of his attention landed on her like a shift in air pressure. Not threatening, but absolute. Dark eyes moved from the glass in her hand to her face, to the service tray balanced on her other arm, to her name badge, then back up. The assessment took about 3 seconds and felt thorough in a way that had nothing to do with looking. "You're not supposed to interact with maintenance staff," he said. His English was precise, each word deliberate, carrying the faint architecture of Korean underneath. "I'm not interacting." She kept the glass extended. "I'm offering water. Drink it or don't." His gaze held hers for a long moment. Then, with something that wasn't quite a smile but lived close to one, he took the glass. "Simone Reed," he read from her badge. "That's what it says." She didn't ask his name. He drank, draining the glass in 3 clean swallows, and she watched the tight line of his jaw ease just slightly, like a fist unclenching. There. The actual person, underneath all that control. "Why?" he asked, returning the empty glass to her tray. She considered the easy answer, chose the true one instead. Because nobody else was going to. Something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or something that had been waiting a long time to be called by its right name. He straightened off the wall, the moment of unguarded humanity folding back under the controlled surface. "Go back to work, Miss Reed. Already on my way." She had taken 4 steps when his voice reached her, low, so only she could catch it. "Thank you." She didn't turn around. 2 hours later, the gala cracked. Simone was collecting glasses near the bar alcove when she heard it. A compressed, urgent exchange from the south corridor. Her head came up on instinct. 3 men had peeled away from the main floor. 2 were built like people whose suits were doing structural work. The third was smaller, pale-jacketed, sweating through his collar. None of them were headed toward the exit. She was moving before she'd made a conscious decision. She rounded the corner and stopped. The man in the maintenance uniform was there. No mop, no cart. He stood at the center of a very still standoff, speaking Korean in a voice so quiet it barely carried, addressed to the man in the pale jacket. The 2 larger figures flanked him at angles that said clearly, "We go where he goes. Not building staff, his people." The nervous man said something in English. Pleading, fragmented. Something about the Meridian accounts. Something about "I swear I didn't." Enough. One word, delivered like a door closing softly on a room. The nervous man stopped. Simone stepped back around the corner without a sound, rejoined the service corridor, kept her breathing steady and her pace even. Her mind was already running numbers. Not a janitor, not even close. Their worlds couldn't be more different, but fate has a way of bringing together what belongs together. Stay tuned to see what happens next. His name was Jae-won Shin. She found that out 3 days later, the same way she found most things that mattered. By looking in the right places when no one was watching. His legitimate face was clean, Korean-born, immigrated at 17, built a property development empire across Atlanta and Charlotte by 32. Multiple companies. A foundation that funded STEM scholarships in low-income Georgia districts. A profile in Atlanta Business Chronicle from 2 years back that described him as visionary, disciplined, and intensely private. His other face, the one that existed in certain careful corners of the Atlanta underground, took more digging. Simone sat in her East Point apartment, surrounded by the quiet machinery of her real work. 2 laptops, a whiteboard covered in columns only she could read, a burner phone on charge, the careful record of 3 years of patient, precise, nearly invisible empire building. She looked at what she'd assembled on Jae-won Shin and felt 2 things arrive at once: respect and the specific inconvenient weight of danger. She closed the laptop and went to sleep. He found her first. She was working a Thursday prep shift at the catering company's West Side staging kitchen when a black SUV pulled up to the loading dock. She knew before the door opened. The back of her neck told her. Jae-won Shin stepped out in a charcoal suit, no maintenance uniform, a white dress shirt with the top buttons loose at the collar. The tattoo she'd glimpsed at the gala was fully visible now in the morning light. A tiger crawling upward from his chest, blackwork so dense it looked like shadow made permanent. The animal's face emerging just above his collar, with a stillness that matched its owner's. He moved across the lot with the unhurried authority of a man who understood that his arrival rearranged rooms. He stopped 3 feet from her. "Simone Reed," he said. The same way he'd said it at the Meridian event, like he was confirming something he'd already decided. She didn't flinch. "Mr. Shin." The slight pause in him was barely visible, a man recalculating. "You know who I am?" "You're a property developer with a very interesting secondary portfolio." She kept her voice level. "I'm a caterer. Is there something I can help you with?" His attention moved over her the way it had at the gala, thorough, unhurried, taking actual inventory rather than performing it. She was in a stained prep apron over a black tee, her box braids pulled back, no jewelry beyond small gold studs. None of the things that usually made people underestimate her were gone. "You saw something at the Meridian event," he said. "I saw a janitor have a quiet conversation." She picked up her clipboard. "Nothing worth reporting." "That's not why I'm here." She looked up. His expression hadn't changed, but something behind his eyes had sharpened, curious, not threatening. The quality of a man who encountered few surprises and found himself looking directly at one. "I ran a background check after the gala," he said. "Standard procedure. I do it with anyone who crosses my attention in the wrong way. I'd have done the same. I know. A beat. Your background is unusual, Ms. Reed. Her pulse stayed flat. Years of practice. I'm a caterer from East Point. I don't know what you expected. I expected exactly that. He held her gaze. What I found was considerably more. The moment stretched between them, charged and still, the way it gets when two people who both know how to be motionless are deciding whether to move. Simone set the clipboard down. What do you want? Breakfast. A pause. There's a place on Edgewood Avenue. I'll be there at 8 tomorrow, if you're interested in a conversation. And if I'm not? The corner of his mouth lifted. Barely, just the edge of it. Then I eat alone and we both pretend this meeting didn't happen. He turned and walked back to the SUV. His driver opened the door without a word. Simone watched him go and felt something she hadn't allowed herself in a long time, the particular electricity of meeting someone who operated at the same level of attention she did. She arrived at the restaurant by 7:50. The Edgewood spot was small, 6 tables, chalkboard menu, owned by a Korean woman in her 60s named Mrs. Bae, who called Jaewon Adul's son, and brought food without being asked. He was already there when Simone arrived, jacket off, sleeves pushed to his forearms. The blackwork tiger was visible at his collar, powerful and still. He'd ordered 2 coffees. You came early, as he said. So did you. She sat across from him. The coffee was good, dark roasted, nothing like the watered-down agency stock. She wrapped both hands around the mug and waited. He studied her for a moment, then, I have a problem. You have several, she said. Which one? Something that might, on a less disciplined face, have been genuine amusement moved through his expression. Someone inside my organization has been feeding information to a rival family for 6 months. My people haven't located the source. Simone turned the mug in her hands. Why are you telling me this? Because your secondary portfolio, he said carefully, includes the kind of intelligence work that finds a leak like this in roughly 10 days. The quiet between them thickened. You went to the gala in maintenance cover to observe your own people, she said slowly. You wanted to watch without being watched. He said nothing, which was its own answer. And then a caterer offered you a glass of water, you ran her name and found something you didn't expect. Very few things catch me off guard, he said. You managed it twice. Simone looked at him across that small table, at the controlled intelligence behind his eyes, the blackwork tiger resting against his collarbone, the hands wrapped around a coffee mug with the steadiness of someone accustomed to holding heavy things. I'm not interested in working for you, she said. I know. He met her eyes without blinking. I'm proposing a partnership. The tension is building and secrets are about to surface. Drop a comment. What do you think will happen when the truth comes out? The partnership started as pure business. He needed the leak identified, quietly from the outside, without triggering whoever was already watching. She had the tools and the reach to do exactly that. In exchange, he offered his name as a shield over her operation, which had been drawing increasing pressure from 2 competing organizations who'd noticed the quiet intelligence network she'd built and couldn't map its center. She moved the pieces behind the scenes. Nobody knew who moved them. That was the point. They met every Tuesday and Thursday at the Edgewood spot. He arrived first. She never let him wait more than 5 minutes. Mrs. Bae brought food without asking. Soft tofu soup, crispy pajeon that Simone developed an immediate and uncomplicated affection for, kimchi whose heat she'd worked up to over the course of 2 weeks. Gwen Chana, Mrs. Bae asked her one Thursday, touching her arm gently as she passed. Are you okay? Gwen Chana, Simone answered. She'd looked it up after the first meeting. Mrs. Bae's face broke into something warm and certain. She said something in Korean to Jaewon on her way back to the kitchen that made him go very still for exactly 2 seconds before he composed himself. What did she say? Simone asked. She said your pronunciation is excellent, he replied, which was not all of it, and they both knew it. She had a name by day 8. The folder went onto the table at their Thursday meeting. Printed documentation, call records, a timeline showing exactly when and through which channel information had transferred. She watched him open it, read through it without speaking. The shift in his face was subtle, a tightening around the jaw, something old and specifically wounded moving behind his eyes, and she understood without being told that the name in the folder belonged to someone he'd trusted for a long time. How certain are you? He asked. Completely. She kept her voice level. The pattern holds across 6 months. He was careful. Not careful enough. He closed the folder, pressed both palms flat on the table, exhaled through his nose. Aish. The Korean word arrived compressed and sharp, frustration distilled to its smallest possible form. Simone said nothing. Some things didn't need a response. After a long moment, he looked up. Whatever the emotion had been, it had been folded and put away. What remained was cold, precise, decided. You did this in 8 days. 10 would have been more thorough. My people have been looking for 6 months. Your people were searching from inside. Loyalty creates blind spots. You see the person, not the pattern. He studied her with the focused attention she'd grown accustomed to over the past 2 weeks, almost comfortable with. There was something in it, the sense of being genuinely seen rather than assessed for utility, that she hadn't anticipated and didn't quite know what to do with. "Tell me about your operation," he said, not a demand. The kind of question someone asks when they've already decided they want the complete answer. Simone considered, then told him. 3 years. Contract intelligence work to start. Corporate clients needing discreet research, nothing illegal. The kind of information management large companies couldn't run through official channels. A network of contacts built slowly and carefully, traded favors, layered trust. Then something larger, a quiet brokerage sitting between 3 organizations who didn't know she existed and would have been at war with each other without her management of the pressure points between them. She moved the pieces. Nobody knew who moved them. That was the entire architecture. When she finished, the restaurant had emptied around them. Mrs. Bay had left a fresh pot of barley tea and disappeared with notable discretion. J1 was looking at her the way she'd looked at him in the Meridian corridor, like he'd expected one thing and found something else entirely. "You've been running this alone," he said, "by design. It's dangerous. So is trusting people." Recognition moved through his expression, quick and genuine. The resonance of someone hearing their own operating principle spoken out loud by a stranger. He'd built his empire on the same foundation. Trust no one fully. Keep the center to yourself. Stay alone at the top. "The competing organizations pressuring you," he said. "That's been going on how long? 8 months. Why haven't you reached out to anyone?" She looked at him steadily. "I reached out to myself." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, without ceremony, he turned her teacup right side up. It had been sitting inverted since Mrs. Bay cleared, and refilled it. Such a small thing, a completely ordinary thing. Simone felt it like a hand pressed flat against a door that had been locked for years. "The family pressuring you is planning to move within 30 days, he said, his voice careful and even. "My intelligence is more current than yours on this particular point. I know. Maybe 3 weeks. 2. He met her eyes. "I want to say something." She waited. "This isn't about the leak." He chose his words the way he did everything, deliberately, with full attention. "I'm not offering to help because of what you found for me. I'm offering because what you've built is worth protecting." He paused. "And because I don't want to sit down on a Tuesday and find you're not across this table." The quiet held that sentence for a moment. Something moved through Simone's chest, the specific sensation of something true arriving before she was ready for it. "J1, you don't have to answer." He straightened his jacket, professionalism reasserted, careful distance back in place. "Think about it." He stood, placed cash on the table for 3 meals, and walked out. Simone sat alone with the barley tea and the slowly settling understanding that somewhere in the last 8 days, the calculations had shifted into something she hadn't planned for. Then her phone lit up. Unknown number. 1 message. They moved the timeline. 72 hours. This is where everything changes. Hit that like button and let me know in the comments which moment got you the most. 72 hours. She called him before she'd set the phone back down. He answered on the first ring, no greeting, just "Where are you?" "East Point, my apartment." "Don't move." A pause. "I'm 20 minutes out." He arrived in 17. He came through her door in the white shirt, sleeves already rolled to the forearm, and the first thing he did was look at the room. The 2 laptops open, the whiteboard dense with columns, the careful layered architecture of everything she'd built, with an expression she hadn't seen on him before. It took her a moment to name it accurately, something very close to awe. Jagia. The word slipped out quiet, almost to himself. He caught it. Sorry, that's not... It's fine. She knew what it meant. She'd looked that one up weeks ago. Sweetheart. What do you know? He crossed to her whiteboard without being invited and read for 5 full seconds before speaking. They contracted a crew. Clean and fast. They want no trace. My source confirmed they have your address and your primary network access point. Simone's jaw tightened. She'd known it was coming. Knowing it and hearing it confirmed at that level of specificity were 2 different things. I'm moving you tonight, he said. Your operation, digital infrastructure and physical setup can be relocated to a secured property I own in Buckhead. High-rise, full coverage. The legitimate kind and the kind that doesn't show up in filings. I'm not running. He turned from the whiteboard. Moving to better ground isn't running. His voice was steady, unhurried, carrying none of the urgency the situation warranted, and somehow that steadiness was the most persuasive thing about it. From the Buckhead property, you can fight on your own terms. Here you're at theirs. He held her gaze. There's a difference. She looked at him. This man who had come into her line of sight as a tired janitor with a glass of water she'd offered without expecting anything back, who had turned out to be a mirror image of everything she'd constructed, built in parallel, running on the same principles, who sat across a small table twice a week and listened the way almost nobody knew how to listen. My operation stays mine, she said. You don't fold it in, you don't redirect it. You don't make decisions about it without me at the table. Agreed. And if this partnership ends, she held his gaze, what you know about my network stays locked. No leverage, not ever. Something moved through his face. Not offense, but something softer, almost pained. I would never use you that way. I know, she said. I needed to say it out loud. He nodded slowly. Understood. They moved within the hour. His people were good, efficient, quiet, no wasted motion, respectful without being told to be. 2 of them addressed her as Ms. Read in a way she understood came directly from him. Everything that mattered was packed, secured, and in transit before midnight. The Buckhead property was on the 24th floor of a glass and steel tower, the kind of address that made Atlanta spread out below you like something to be understood rather than endured. Clean lines, expensive quiet. Her second office had already been set up. Her kind of setup, 2 workstations, wall space for a whiteboard, and she understood without asking that he'd arranged it before she'd agreed to come. He showed her the space and then stepped back to the doorway. His expression was careful, giving her room. Gwenchana? He asked. She turned from the window. He was backlit by the hall light. White shirt open at the collar, the blackwork tiger visible. The animal's face calm and still above his collar as it always was, as he almost always was. But the expression behind his eyes right now was the same one she'd caught for 10 seconds at the gala. Unguarded. The real tired, the real person. She crossed the room and touched his jaw. Just her fingertips, lightly, testing whether the door would hold or open. He went absolutely still. The crew, she said. You've already handled it. My people made contact 90 minutes ago. His voice had dropped. They won't be coming. I saw the update. She kept her hand where it was. You didn't tell me. I wanted you settled first. His hand came up and covered hers, not moving it away, just holding. His palm was warm and steady. I didn't want the help to arrive before the person, she said. Yes. His thumb traced across her knuckles. The controlled surface had opened in a way she understood few people ever witnessed. I've been running this city for 10 years, he said. Every move calculated, every relationship with a condition attached. I stopped letting people... He stopped, started again. You gave me a glass of water. You didn't know who I was. You didn't want anything from it. You just saw that I was tired. You were. Nay, yes. The Korean word arrived soft. Nobody had noticed that in a very long time, or bothered to. Simone looked at him in the city light and felt the last defensive calculation fall. Not the strategic one. She'd keep that forever. It was part of how she was made. The other one. The one that kept measuring distance and deciding she was safer inside it. She closed the remaining space between them. His lips met hers with a kind of care that surprised her. The way a person kisses someone they've decided matters, not the way they kiss someone they've wanted carelessly. There was hunger underneath it, and deliberateness on top, and she felt his heartbeat under her hand against his chest and thought, There's the actual person, all the way through. When they separated, his forehead rested against hers. Both of them still. "We still have 2 organizations to dismantle," she said. "I know." He pulled back enough to look at her fully. "We'll handle them. Together this time." A real smile arrived on his face. Slow, unhurried, genuine. It changed everything about him. Younger, lighter, something long kept coming out into the air. "Together," he said. "The stakes have never been higher, and the next chapter will change everything. You won't want to miss what's coming." The next 3 weeks were a war conducted in near total silence. Not gunfire and confrontation. That was the visible kind of conflict, the kind that generated evidence, casualties, and coverage. The war Simone and Jae-won waged was quieter, and in its own way, far more complete. It was fought in data architecture, financial exposure, strategic isolation, and the careful dismantling of networks that had counted on their targets remaining separate and uncoordinated. They were neither. She worked from the Buckhead office, her systems rebuilt faster and cleaner than before. He operated from the adjacent room, running his organization's response with the same cold precision that had made his reputation. They moved through each other's space with a naturalness that still caught her off guard sometimes. The way 2 people who have been working alone at the same frequency find collaboration almost instinctive. Simone mapped the financial architecture sustaining the Castillo family's Atlanta operations and exposed it to 3 legitimate entities who'd been quietly extorted. Jae-won severed the supply lines that kept their presence functional. Without money, without supply, without the intelligence advantage they'd built their strategy on, the Castillo family's Atlanta network collapsed in 11 days. The second threat was internal. 3 men inside his organization who'd positioned themselves to benefit from a transition of power they'd considered inevitable. When Jae-won appeared in their offices, calm in his white shirt, the black-work tiger visible, 2 of his most trusted men at either side, no voices were raised. He spoke quietly. All 3 men were gone from Atlanta by nightfall. "Aish," Simone murmured at her desk, reading the final confirmation, relief made mild because it was done. He appeared in the doorway. "Your Korean is getting better." "I practice." She closed the laptop and looked at him. "It's over. It's over." He stayed in the doorway for a moment. Afternoon light came through the windows at an angle that picked out the details, the quiet weight still living behind his eyes, the way he held himself when he was allowing himself to simply be still. "There's somewhere I want to take you," he said. He drove her to Duluth, 40 minutes northeast of Atlanta, to a neighborhood where the Korean diaspora had put down roots over 3 decades. The streets were lined with Korean-owned businesses, signage in Hangul beside English, the smell of grilled meat and sesame drifting from restaurant vents. He pulled up in front of a modest house with a small vegetable garden in the side yard. A man opened the door before they reached the porch. Late 60s, Jae-won's cheekbones, sharp eyes that assessed and warmed in the same motion. He wore a cardigan and the particular ease of a man who'd worked very hard for a long time and had arrived somewhere worth arriving at. "Ioma made doenjang jjigae," the man said in English, with a glance at his son that communicated volumes about prior conversations Simone hadn't been present for. She made enough for everyone. Jae-won's hand settled at the small of her back, brief, warm, steady. "My father," he said quietly. "Park Won-shin. He understands English completely and will pretend otherwise when it suits him." "Annyeonghaseyo," Simone said carefully. Park Won looked at her with his sharp, warm eyes. His expression did the same thing his son's did, the corner of his mouth lifting in that measured, unhurried way. "Annyeonghaseyo," he returned with unmistakable approval and stepped aside to let them in. The kitchen smelled like fermented soybean paste and sesame oil, and something Simone had no precise word for, except home in its most fundamental form. Jae-won's mother turned from the stove, a small, precise woman with grey-streaked hair pulled back, moving with the focused energy of someone who'd built a life by refusing to stop. She looked at Simone the way Park Won had, as though confirming something long anticipated. She said something in Korean to her son. "What did she say?" Simone asked. Jae-won was quiet for a beat. "She said, 'You're nothing like she expected.' Is that a good thing?" Coming from her? He handed her a bowl of rice. It's the best thing. They ate at the kitchen table, his mother moving fluidly between Korean and English. His father asking Simone careful, well-informed questions about Atlanta's East Side development patterns that made very clear where his son had gotten his strategic mind. She answered honestly, watching Jae-won watch her, the particular attentiveness of a man seeing two parts of his life in the same room, and found herself sitting in something she recognized slowly, like a word surfacing from memory: happiness, the uncomplicated kind. After dinner, they sat in the small living room while his parents debated a Korean drama playing at low volume on the television. Jae-won sat close enough that their shoulders touched, his hand covering hers on the cushion between them. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, "about what we've built." His thumb moved across her knuckles, a gesture that had become its own language between them. "How much of it is worth keeping?" She turned to look at him. "I've been running this organization since I was 24, he said. "My father worked construction for 15 years to put me through school, so I spent the first decade out of school building exactly what he'd worked that hard to get me away from." Something moved across his face, old, complicated, and resolved. "I've been thinking about stopping, not all at once, not quickly, but—" He held her gaze. "What I want to protect has changed." The weight of that settled over her, and she felt, precisely, its echo. "I've been running numbers on the same thing," she said. "What it would take to transition my network into something clean, something that helps people instead of just managing them." He looked at her like she'd spoken in the exact frequency he'd been broadcasting on alone for years. "Saranghae," he said, quiet, the word she'd learned, the one she'd been waiting, without knowing she was waiting for someone to mean. Simone leaned her head against his shoulder. "I know," she said. "Me too." In the other room, his mother turned the television down to give them quiet without making it a production. His father pretended to fall asleep. Outside, Duluth carried on, Korean restaurants, family-owned shops, the particular warmth of a community that had built something real in a country that hadn't always made it easy. Inside, for the first time in a long time, nothing needed managing. The ending is here, and it's going to stay with you. If this story touched your heart, show it some love with a like, and subscribe for more. 14 months later. The offices of Reed Shin Consulting occupied half a floor in a midtown Atlanta tower, licensed, legitimate, doing the kind of strategic intelligence and advisory work that large organizations paid serious money for and preferred not to discuss publicly. The name on the frosted glass door had been Simone's idea. He'd agreed before she finished the sentence, and she'd noticed then the way something settled in him when she'd put her name first. She was reviewing a client proposal when he appeared in her doorway. Charcoal jacket, white shirt, 3 buttons loose, the blackwork tiger visible at his collar because she'd told him early on she liked seeing it, and he hadn't covered it since. He was carrying 2 coffees from the Edgewood spot, which they still visited every Tuesday and Thursday. Mrs. Bay had started calling Simone Natal, my daughter, 4 months ago, and nobody had objected. "Board call in 20, he said, setting her cup down. "I know." She reached for it. The ring on her right hand caught the morning light, simple gold, chosen on a Sunday afternoon at his parents' kitchen table while his mother pretended not to watch. He looked at her the way he'd been looking at her since the Buckhead window, like she was the most real thing in the room. "You offered me a glass of water," he said. "You looked tired. Gwenchana." He took her hand. "More than okay." Outside, Atlanta moved, complicated, relentless, full of its own negotiations. Inside, for once, nothing needed to be counted or managed or survived. It just needed to be lived. Thank you for being here for this journey. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. There are more stories where this one came from. What should the next story be about? Tell me in the comments.